Okay, so you've worked out you need to do a PI planning. And you know what a PI planning is, and you've also fulfilled the 3 checks to make sure you actually need to run a PI planning event. If you haven't done that, please go and visit the first video in this series. This is the second video in the PI planning series. This series where I'm going to walk you through step by step how to implement not just an average or an okay PI planning event, a truly amazing PI planning event, something that you can be proud of, something that everybody feels galvanized and excited by, not drained by. Okay, so this is what this series is all about. In today's video, we are going to be looking and taking the example that we covered off in the last video, and we're going to see how we can form these into teams. So we're going to have a walkthrough of that. So let's just have a look at how we form our Agile release train, which is the topic of today's video. Okay, so let's just recap. We have this legal system that actually is a Google for lawyers, if you like. Let's just give this company a name. We'll just call them Justice Inc. Okay, and this Justice Inc., they're creating a new product in the Australian market. They've got 3 stages that their workflow goes through. So rather than assuming that they're teams at this stage, we should just say, okay, there are 3 stages that the workflow goes through. And what we want to do now is we want to see what are the options for us? How can we look at forming these into teams, right? Obviously, if we're planning an Agile program, you've got multiple teams in there, how are we structuring the teams is the first step that we want to look at before we think about planning. When anyone comes to me and says, okay, Ahmed, can you help us with the planning? One of the first things I want to look at is, okay, what is the structure of the teams? Now, sometimes what I find is customers are sometimes a little bit hazy about, oh, it could be this, I'm not sure, we're still forming it, etc., etc. So we need to pin that down first, okay? And so that's what we're going to be looking at in this video. We've got a very simple example over here, so let's have a look at that. So we've got these 3 stages, right? Think of these as stages, okay? But we've got 2 ways in which we can actually slice this, okay? We can have a look at and we can say, okay, if these are the systems that they need to go through, we can just create a team for each one. So we can have a team 1 like that. We can have that, call that team 2 and team 3. Okay. The other way we could have a look at this is we could say, actually the problem with this is that because if we need to release any real value into the market, what's going to need to happen is that we're going to need to have a portion of the editorial system in place so the editors can enter the case law in. We're going to need to have a part of the fabrication so that the content, it can be updated and it can be refined. And we're also going to need to have a portion of the end user interface for the customer as well. So any functionality that we release into the market is going to require elements from all 3 of these different systems. The other way we could do it is we could look across and slice our teams across these 3 systems, right? And so, for example, imagine we are providing family law and corporate law and criminal law as an example. We might want to slice up our teams by family law, criminal law, and corporate law, right? And in that way, we can actually release something valuable to the market. Each team is able to do that. Now, that would be the optimal way to do it. That's what's called a cross-functional team. Can you see the difference? Now, each team is now able to release something really valuable without depending upon another team. Now, remember, dependencies are incredibly expensive and they take a lot of effort and they cost a lot of money. So we want to try and reduce those dependencies as much as we possibly can. Okay, so that's the optimal way which we would actually do it. But actually, in actual fact, in this example, I'm going to be opting for the system rather than the cross-functional approach, right? And now many of you may say, well, Ahmed, why would you do that? Why would you go intentionally put together a team that's ill-formed? Well, I'm doing that on purpose because actually from about 80% of the companies that I actually go and work with, or that I have actually seen, have malformed team structures. So it's not useful for me to come up and give you an optimal team structure and show you how it would work if in the real world I know you are most likely, many of you are most likely to actually work in structures that actually are ill-formed, right? Okay, so that's why we are going to come up with 3 system teams, not cross-functional teams. By the way, if you think I'm being too negative, right, about my comments about most of the teams are malformed in the workplace, leave your comments below and put me straight, right? I always want to fix my flawed assumptions, right? So if I've got if I've got something wrong over there, please just put the record straight, okay? But that's my experience anyway. So we're using system teams. We're having each of the teams look around, work around and orient themselves around the different systems. We've got the editorial system, we've got the fabrication system, and we've got the customer portal system as well. Okay, because I'm such a creative genius, I'm going to come up with some names for them. So let's just call that apple. Let's call that orange. Let's call that pear. Okay, right? Now, so here's my first tip for you. Try, even if you've got system teams, right? And we saw that having cross-functional teams is far superior option. So if you can do that, please do that in the real world, okay? But the example I want to show you is one of a suboptimal one. So if you have an optimal option to do that, to form your teams in a really great cross-functional way, please go ahead and do that, okay? Right. Here's my first tip though. If you can't, right, for whatever reason, right, have or set up a cross-functional team, right, then try to make sure that you don't name your teams by the function that they have. So for example, it'd be a bad idea to call this an editorial team, a fabrication team, or customer portal team. And the reason for that is because like individuals, like human beings, that if I have a label for myself, right, if I give myself a label, then that starts to become my identity. When that becomes my identity, now for me to shift that, right, to something different, it now requires quite a lot of psychological effort as well, and mental effort as well. So if we can label it something kind of agnostic to what it is you're actually doing, that's far better, right? So if you can label them like I put apple, orange, or pear, whatever you come up with, something hopefully a little bit more creative than something that I've come up with, okay, that would be better. But the important thing is it shouldn't say what the actual function is, because you want that flexibility to merge and change that, and you don't want to peg the identity down. Right, now, let's say now we've got these 3 teams that we form now. This is the foundation now of our Agile release train. Apple, orange, and pear. Okay, now, so what we have is we've got, let's just say, for argument's sake, to keep things interesting, let's say Apple has 8 people, orange has 4 people, and pear has 10 people. Okay, so we've got that now. Now, clearly, this is a tiny train, right? But it's going to give you a good example and a good idea of how we go from here. So here's the deal. If you've got any ideas, any horrible events that you can think of, you can Twitter me on Ahmed A. Syed. Give those to me. We'll start to throw them into the video series and I'll show you how we would overcome those. Okay. You can also leave them in the comments below on the YouTube channel, or if this is on LinkedIn, on the LinkedIn, then you can leave the comments in there and I will scoop them all up and I will put together some of these nasty surprises and how we overcome them. Okay, examples could be like, for example, the system blows up or the requirements change the last minute or someone falls sick, you know, during your PI planning event, or anything crazy could happen. Okay, or there could be a mutiny like happened with me, right, at one of my PI planning events. But we're going to try and keep it simple though, right, because this is still a beginner series, so we're going to keep it pretty typical stuff. So comments below or Twitter, please. Okay, so now what have we got? We've got this firm foundation. Okay, look, it's not perfect. Is this perfect structure? No. Here's a secret. Neither is yours, right? And that's okay. It's absolutely okay. What's the most important thing? The most important thing is we have clarity in terms of what we have. We know where we want to go, and we've got a step-by-step roadmap to get and do the best we possibly can with the situation that we have, which is not going to be upfront, spoiler alert, it's not going to be textbook perfect anymore, okay? There's going to be lots of stuff that gets thrown in and it's not going to be plannable, okay? And that's why we use Agile, okay? So we are confident where we are, we know what we have got, and now we're going to see how we're going to take this stuff and what we're going to do with that in the next video, okay? In the next video, we're going to take this information and we're going to create a roadmap, because we need to know what the high-level intent is, and we need to know the goal of where we're going before we get stuck into the PI planning event. So look forward to seeing you in the next video. Keep growing, love learning, and most importantly, don't forget to bring the joy, because that is the most important thing. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you can't wait for the next video in this series, then I've got a lot of videos on PI planning. Click over here for the standard PI planning and click over here for remote PI planning. Okay, take care. Bye.